how do we understand other cultures? How do we get into the minds of others? There is a misconception about history and the social sciences that assumes that when you read a source, a document, or a study of a different culture, the truth will arise out of it, that the sources will speak to you. But the difficulty arises when we acknowledge that research always begins with preconceptions, tools and language moulded through our own culture and societal ideas. Does this then confuse the results, skew the research towards our own agenda, however unintentional? How do we avoid this difference of perspective? The anthropologist Clifford Geertz, arguably the greatest anthropologist of the 20th century, had an influential answer. He called it thick description. Through this lens, people can't be understood just through economic ideas like a rational cost-benefit analysis, or through studying how they were governed, or through an analysis of the means of production, or by assuming that philosophy meant the same for the philosophe of Enlightenment France as it did for someone in modern-day Bali. To understand people, you had to look closely at their culture. There are no total definitions or supreme theories, or a general theory of cultural interpretation. Geertz said that man is an animal suspended in webs of significance he himself has spun. To understand people, you have to understand the webs. To understand any given culture, you have to get in amongst it. To take a simplified example, an alien wouldn't understand 90s America just by watching Forrest Gump and entering the lines into their alien supercomputer. They'd have to understand politics, love, war, Hollywood. They'd have to come down and study the interconnecting themes. Geertz uses the example of two boys winking rapidly. One has a twitch, the other is winking to a friend. Both look the same, but the second can only be understood to be different through knowing the social code of winking, the idea of a joke, the event he is winking about, or the biological and psychological pathology that causes the twitch. A simple observation requires understanding a web of meaning, a thick description. For Geertz, you don't study a village, you study in a village. In 1958, Geertz and his wife travelled to a small Balinese village of around 500 people, remote in its own world, as he says. The relatively new Balinese Republic had deemed cockfighting, a long-held tradition, as backward and primitive and declared it illegal. As expected, the villagers continued anyway, and occasional raids, confiscations and fines were endured. Geertz and his wife attended a cockfight in the village square that was raided, and on what he describes as the anthropological principle when in Rome, ran from the authorities with everyone else. Because of this, the pair were immediately accepted by the locals, while before they had been treated with indifference, even disdain. This intrigued Geertz. And through studying the cockfight, the betting, the myths, the rules, Geertz discovers a complex set of cultural codes that regulate village society. While Balinese culture, for Geertz in 1958 at least, was relatively slow, subdued and peaceful, the cockfight exploded this and reminded people of the cultural code that regulated society. It's what Geertz called a meta-social commentary. The cockfight is that web of meaning. Understanding this about Balinese culture would be impossible if you came with presuppositions about gambling, taking time off work for entertainment, or the Western idea of work and politics. Only by starting at the bottom and paying close attention can the larger meaning be inferred. We can see from the cockfight why Geertz has been influential in other disciplines. And it might also help us look at the seemingly banal everydayness of our own culture and to come to some broader conclusions about the meaning and politics that are culturally ingrained into all of us.